You're tired. And it's not just the kind of tired that a weekend off or a long nap can fix. It's deeper than that. It's the kind of tired that creeps into your bones because you've been carrying a weight that isn't even yours to carry. The invisible weight of always being the one who smooths things over, the one who bites their tongue to keep the peace, the one who puts a smile on their face even when inside they're screaming. That's the kind of exhaustion I'm talking about. And I know you felt it, because it's a story so many of us share. From a young age, most of us were told the same story: be good, be polite, be humble, be kind, and good things will happen to you. We were told the world rewards goodness, that people will naturally return kindness with kindness, that if you play fair, others will play fair too. Maybe you even believed it for a while. Maybe you still want to believe it, because it sounds so beautiful, so hopeful, so reassuring. But let me ask you, has that been your experience? Has your kindness always been respected? Has your patience always been valued? Or have you found yourself again and again in situations where your niceness was taken as an open invitation to be ignored, to be overlooked, or worse, to be used? Think about it. How many times have you swallowed your pride because you didn't want to hurt someone else's feelings? How many times have you said it's fine when it wasn't fine at all? How many times have you let someone cross your boundaries, take advantage of your time, your energy, your generosity, and instead of pushing back you told yourself, well, it's better to just let it go? Each of those moments piles up inside you, like invisible bricks added one by one to a backpack you never asked to wear. And the cruel part is, the world doesn't thank you for carrying it. Most people don't even notice. They just get used to you doing it. There's a dangerous myth at the heart of this, and it's one that almost every culture, especially ours here in America, loves to repeat. The myth says, good people win in the end. Play by the rules, be the nice guy, and life will reward you. But let me challenge that. Look around you. Who holds influence in your workplace, your community, even in your family? Who gets listened to? Who sets the tone? Is it the person who always says yes, who always avoids conflict, who always sacrifices quietly? Or is it the person who knows how to draw a line, who isn't afraid to say no, who commands respect because they're not trying to earn approval, they're standing in their own authority? We both know the answer. And that's why you feel this heaviness. Because deep down, you've started to realize that the story you were told, the story about how goodness alone leads to respect and fulfillment, isn't matching the reality you're living. You've begun to notice the gap between what you were taught and what you're experiencing, and that gap is painful. It makes you feel invisible. It makes you feel unappreciated. It makes you feel like no matter how much you give, it's never enough. And the truth is, in many cases, it never will be enough, because you're playing a game with rules that don't exist. Let's be brutally honest for a moment. The world doesn't reward you for being nice. It rewards you for being effective, for being strategic, for showing up in a way that people can't ignore. Niceness without boundaries doesn't earn respect, it earns dependence. It makes you the one everyone runs to for help, but no one thinks twice about when it's time to show gratitude. And you've seen this play out in your own life. You've been the loyal employee who worked overtime without complaining, only to be passed over for promotion. You've been the friend who always showed up, but the minute you needed something, everyone was suddenly busy. You've been the partner or family member who gave, and somehow it was still never enough. That's the brutal reality of being too nice. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not here to tell you to stop being a decent human being. I'm not telling you to turn cold or cruel or indifferent. What I am saying is that you can't keep confusing self-erasure with kindness. You can't keep pretending that sacrificing your voice, your needs, your boundaries is somehow noble. Because it isn't. It's draining you, and it's robbing you of the respect you deserve. And if you're honest with yourself, you already know this. You felt the sting of being overlooked. You felt the bitterness of realizing your patience and loyalty were mistaken for weakness. And you've asked yourself, maybe late at night when you couldn't sleep, what's the point? Why do I keep doing this? That's the question that matters. And it's the one most people are too afraid to answer. Because if you admit that being nice isn't working, then you have to face the uncomfortable truth that maybe the whole story you were told was a lie. Maybe goodness on its own isn't enough. Maybe the world doesn't play fair. And if that's true, then you're faced with a choice: keep living under the weight of that lie, or wake up and start playing a different game. This is where the shift begins. The first step is recognizing that the exhaustion you feel isn't random, it's the direct result of years of conditioning. Years of being told to be pleasant, agreeable, patient, humble. Years of being rewarded not for your power, but for your ability to disappear into the background. And the second step is this: deciding that you're not going to carry that invisible weight anymore. You're not going to keep swallowing your voice, your needs, your pride, just to keep the peace. Because peace bought at the price of your dignity isn't peace at all, it's surrender. So I'll leave you with this question as we close out this first part: how much longer are you willing to carry that weight? How much longer are you willing to play the role of the nice guy if it keeps leaving you drained, disrespected, and invisible? The moment you decide you're done with the myth, done with the prison of politeness, that's the moment real change begins. And in the next part, we're going to dig deeper into why you became this way in the first place, and how you can finally break free. But for now, sit with this: being nice hasn't given you the respect you deserve. And until you're ready to let go of that illusion, you'll keep carrying a backpack full of bricks that was never yours to begin with. If you want to understand why you've spent so much of your life trying to be the nice guy, the pleaser, the one who always sacrifices, then you have to go back to where it started. Because you weren't born this way. No child comes into the world desperate for approval, afraid to say no, terrified of disappointing others. That gets taught, and in most cases, it gets taught very early. Think back to your childhood. How many times did you hear phrases like "don't do that, it's rude"? Or "be nice to your cousin, don't argue"? Or "you're such a polite boy, such a sweet girl"? At first, it seems harmless. After all, what's wrong with teaching kids to behave, to be polite, to fit in? But here's what actually happens. Every time you were scolded for speaking up, every time you were rewarded for staying quiet, every time you were praised for being agreeable instead of authentic, a seed was planted. A seed that grew into the belief that love, acceptance, and safety only come when you erase parts of yourself. And when you're a kid, survival comes first. You learn fast what gets you approval and what brings rejection. If raising your voice gets you punished, you stop raising your voice. If saying no gets you labeled selfish, you stop saying no. If smiling and nodding gets you praised, you keep smiling and nodding, even when you don't mean it. That's how the mask forms. That's how you become the kid who hides their anger, who swallows their tears, who molds themselves into whatever version of good the adults around them wanted to see. And if no one helps you unlearn it, you grow into the adult who does the exact same thing. Now, here's the tragic part. When you look at your own life today and wonder why you can't say no without guilt, why you still feel responsible for everyone else's comfort, why you keep forgiving people who don't deserve it, this is the answer. You were conditioned. Conditioned to believe that your worth depends on pleasing others. Conditioned to believe that kindness means silence, that politeness means submission, that love has to be earned by sacrificing your own needs. This isn't just behavior. It's fear. That's the part most people don't realize. Behind the mask of kindness is usually fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of abandonment. Fear of being seen as a bad person. Fear of being who you really are, angry, needy, opinionated, imperfect. Because you were taught that those parts of you were unacceptable. And so you buried them under a smile. You buried them under apologies. You buried them under endless yes to requests you didn't want to fulfill. But think about it. How many times have you told yourself you're just being empathetic, when in reality you were terrified of confrontation? How many times have you told yourself you're being understanding, when in reality you were just afraid they'd leave if you spoke up? How many times have you called yourself kind, when what you were really being was scared of not being enough? You see, what looks like kindness on the outside is often just fear dressed up in polite clothes. And the cost of living this way is enormous. Because when you live behind that mask long enough, it doesn't feel like a mask anymore. It feels like who you are. You forget what your real voice even sounds like. You look in the mirror and can't tell where the mask ends and your identity begins. You convince yourself that you're easygoing, patient, forgiving, but inside, you're boiling with resentment, exhaustion, and disappointment. You can't figure out why you feel so invisible, but deep down you know it's because you've been hiding in plain sight for years. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a person at a party, laughing at every joke, smiling at every insult, nodding along with every story. Everyone loves them. Everyone says, "What a nice guy. What a sweet girl." But that person goes home later, looks in the mirror, and feels hollow. Because they weren't really there. They were just playing the role everyone expected. That's what happens when you live for approval. You become an actor in your own life, constantly editing yourself to fit the script that pleases the crowd. And here's the harsh truth: no amount of approval will ever fill that emptiness. Because it's not real acceptance. People aren't loving you, they're loving the mask. They're loving the version of you that never complains, never resists, never offends. And if you ever dare to drop the act, if you say no, if you show anger, if you speak your truth, you risk losing the very acceptance you worked so hard to earn. That's why people stay stuck. Because the mask feels safe, even though it's suffocating. But let's be clear. This isn't kindness. Real kindness comes from strength. Real kindness is when you choose to help because you want to, not because you're scared not to. Real kindness is when you say yes from a place of abundance, not because you're terrified of saying no. What most people are calling kindness isn't kindness at all, it's submission. It's fear masquerading as virtue. And that fear is sabotaging your relationships, your confidence, and your potential. The saddest part? Most people never realize they're doing it. They go through life believing they're just good people, when in reality they're prisoners of their conditioning. They've been trained to confuse approval with love, silence with peace, compliance with kindness. And because they don't see the difference, they keep repeating the same pattern, year after year, until they don't even remember who they were before the mask. So let me ask you, when was the last time you said no without apologizing? When was the last time you admitted you were angry without feeling ashamed? When was the last time you let yourself be fully seen, flaws and all, without worrying about losing approval? If you can't remember, then maybe it's time to admit the truth. You haven't been living as yourself. You've been living as a carefully edited version designed to keep you safe. The good news? You can unlearn this. You can take off the mask. But the first step is naming it for what it is. Stop calling it kindness when it's fear. Stop calling it empathy when it's avoidance. Stop pretending it's generosity when it's self-abandonment. Because until you see it clearly, you'll keep feeding the same cycle. And this is where our journey really begins. Because once you understand the hidden roots of people-pleasing, you can start to dig them out. You can start to see how much of your exhaustion, your frustration, your invisibility isn't random, it's the predictable result of living a life built on fear instead of authenticity. And in the next part, we're going to bring in someone who saw through this illusion centuries ago, Machiavelli. He understood better than anyone why being good without being strategic is a recipe for being discarded. But before we get there, sit with this: the mask you wear may have protected you once, but if you don't take it off, it will eventually become your skin. And the day you forget who you really are, that's the day you've lost everything. Now that we've pulled the mask off and exposed what's really behind this endless need to please, it's time to face a reality most people don't want to accept. Because here's the truth: the world doesn't run on kindness. It doesn't run on fairness. It doesn't reward the person with the biggest heart. The world runs on power, on influence, on strategy. And nobody explained this more clearly than a man who lived 500 years ago, Niccolo Machiavelli. Now, don't roll your eyes just because you've heard his name thrown around like it's synonymous with evil. Machiavelli wasn't a devil whispering instructions to tyrants. He was a realist. He was one of the first people honest enough to write down how power actually works in the real world. And the reason his ideas have survived for centuries is because he ripped away the fairy tale illusions and showed the game for what it really is. In his most famous book, The Prince, Machiavelli wrote a line that still hits like a punch to the gut: everyone sees what you appear to be, but few feel what you really are. Think about that. You might have the best intentions, the purest motives, the kindest heart, but none of that matters if what people see doesn't line up with strength, presence, or authority. In other words, you will be judged on appearance, not on essence. You will be valued not for your hidden goodness, but for the impact you project. And if what you project is weakness, then weakness is how you'll be treated. Look around in your own life. Who gets promoted at work? Who gets listened to in meetings? Who gets elected, chosen, admired? Is it always the most honest, the most selfless, the most kind? Or is it often the person who knows how to command attention, who knows how to say no, who knows how to play the game with confidence? Machiavelli saw this centuries ago, and it hasn't changed. The ones who rise aren't always the nicest, they're the ones who know how to appear strong, even when they're not. And here's where the metaphor of the fox and the lion comes in. Machiavelli said a leader has to be both, a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to terrify wolves. The fox is clever, watchful, cautious. It sees what others don't. The lion is bold, powerful, undeniable. It creates presence, it commands respect. And the real key is balance. If you're only a fox, you're too clever for your own good, you'll be dismissed as sly, untrustworthy. If you're only a lion, you're brute force without subtlety, you'll walk into traps without even knowing it. But when you can combine the two, cunning and courage, perception and presence, you become someone people can't manipulate and can't ignore. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. But isn't that manipulative? Isn't that dishonest? No. That's survival. It's effectiveness. It's reality. Because here's the cold truth, being good without being strong isn't noble, it's dangerous. It makes you fresh prey in a jungle that doesn't care about your purity of heart. Machiavelli wasn't telling people to be cruel, he was telling them to stop being naive. To stop confusing virtue with powerlessness. To stop thinking that if you just keep being nice, the world will eventually hand you the respect you deserve. Let's ground this in something modern. Think about the workplace. How many times have you seen the quiet, dependable worker get overlooked while the assertive, boundary-setting coworker climbs the ladder? The dependable one was nice, but the assertive one projected power. Or think about relationships. How many times have you seen someone bend over backwards, always giving, always accommodating, only to end up ignored or even abandoned? Meanwhile, the person who is clear about what they will and won't accept gets respect. That's Machiavelli's lesson in action. The world doesn't reward endless giving. It rewards strength plus strategy. This doesn't mean you have to turn into some cold, calculating villain. But it does mean you need to stop equating goodness with submission. Stop thinking that your worth is proven by how much you endure. Machiavelli saw this flaw centuries ago. He said that a man who tries to act like a good man in all circumstances is doomed to ruin among those who are not good. And isn't that what you've experienced? You've tried to be good in every situation, and what did it get you? Silence. Disrespect. Betrayal. Let me push you here. How much longer are you going to cling to the fantasy that morality alone earns respect? Because until you let go of that, you will keep living as someone else's tool instead of your own master. That's the brutal truth Machiavelli wanted us to see. Not because he hated virtue, but because he hated naivety. He knew that in a world full of predators, kindness without strength isn't kindness at all, it's weakness. And that's why he urged leaders to focus less on being loved and more on being respected, even feared if necessary. Because love without respect fades, but respect without love endures. Now, don't misunderstand me. You don't need to make people fear you. But you do need to make people think twice before dismissing you, ignoring you, or walking all over you. And that doesn't happen by being endlessly nice. It happens by being a presence. By embodying both the fox and the lion. by understanding when to smile and when to roar. So let me ask you again, when people look at you, what do they see? Do they see someone who can be walked over, or someone who has boundaries? Do they see someone they can manipulate, or someone who can't be played? Do they see someone replaceable, or someone who carries weight in the room? Because in the end, that's what determines whether you're respected. This is the brutal reality Machiavelli tried to show us. Appearances matter, strategy matters, presence matters. If you don't learn to combine those things with your goodness, you'll always be the overlooked one, the discarded one, the one carrying the weight that isn't yours. And the real tragedy? You'll convince yourself you're noble while the world quietly takes advantage of your blindness. But here's the good news. You don't have to abandon your values to become respected. You just have to stop using your values as shackles. You have to stop believing that niceness is the ticket to respect. Machiavelli's lesson is this: respect doesn't come from being endlessly pleasant. It comes from showing people that you have power, that you have presence, and that you won't be erased. And in the next part, we're going to take this further. Because if being nice isn't enough, if pure morality doesn't work, then what does? What does real kindness look like when it's combined with strength? What's the difference between authentic compassion and naive submission? That's where we go next. But before we get there, sit with this: you don't have to choose between being good and being respected. You just have to stop mistaking weakness for virtue. Let's draw a line in the sand right now, because this is where most people get confused. They think kindness and weakness are the same thing. They think being a good person means being endlessly forgiving, endlessly patient, endlessly self-sacrificing. They think to be kind is to swallow every insult, accept every injustice, and smile while doing it. But let me tell you, that's not kindness. That's self-abandonment. That's cowardice dressed up as virtue. And if you don't learn the difference, you'll spend the rest of your life mistaking your change for compassion. Real kindness is not passive. Real kindness does not erase you. Real kindness doesn't require you to lay yourself down as a doormat for people who don't even bother to wipe their feet. That's not kindness, that's submission. And submission doesn't inspire respect, it invites exploitation. Because here's the reality: when people see you refusing to stand up for yourself, when they see you always saying yes, always forgiving without consequence, always keeping the peace no matter the cost, they don't think, "Wow, what a noble soul." They think, "This person is easy. This person won't push back. This person won't make me pay a price for taking advantage." And so they keep taking and taking and taking. I want you to really think about this. How many times have you mistaken fear for kindness? You said yes because you were afraid of being rejected. You forgave quickly because you were afraid of conflict. You swallowed your anger because you were afraid of being seen as difficult. And then you told yourself, "I'm just being a good person." No, you were being scared. You were protecting yourself, not by standing in your truth, but by hiding behind a mask of fake compassion. This is why so many people live in quiet resentment. They give and give, they bend and bend, and then they can't understand why they feel bitter, why they feel invisible, why they feel like no one respects them. It's because the world doesn't respect weakness, no matter how nicely it's packaged. Weakness, no matter how much you dress it up as virtue, will always be treated as weakness. So let's get practical. What does real kindness look like? Real kindness has boundaries. Real kindness knows when to say no. Real kindness can walk away when something isn't right. Real kindness doesn't keep giving to people who only take. It doesn't confuse generosity with self-destruction. You can still be compassionate and firm at the same time. You can still be loving while saying, "This is not acceptable." That's the kind of kindness that earns respect. Think about a strong parent. A parent who loves their child deeply doesn't let them run wild, doesn't let them eat candy for breakfast, doesn't let them play with fire just because they don't want to upset them. That's not love, that's negligence. Real love says, "I care about you too much to let you harm yourself for me." Real love says no when it needs to. That's the difference between indulgence and discipline, between weakness and kindness. And it's the same in your life. When you set a boundary, when you say no, when you refuse to be mistreated, that's not cruelty. That's strength. That's respect for yourself and for the relationship. But too many of us don't practice that kind of kindness. We practice the counterfeit version. We live on naive kindness. Naive kindness says, if I give enough, people will finally appreciate me. Naive kindness says, if I forgive everything, people will love me. Naive kindness says, if I sacrifice enough, someone will eventually notice. And naive kindness lives perpetually disappointed, perpetually resentful, because it's projecting onto others a level of nobility that doesn't exist. And here's the tragic irony: the more you live in naive kindness, the less anyone values you. You end up being invisible, replaceable, a background character in your own life. People may smile at you, may praise you, may say, "What a nice person," but the minute you're no longer useful, you're discarded without hesitation. Because in the jumble of life, kindness without strength isn't seen as goodness, it's seen as weakness. And weakness, to predators, looks like food. So I'll ask you this: is your kindness protecting you, or is it exposing you? Is it making you stronger, or is it making you smaller? Is it giving you respect, or is it turning you into someone others overlook? Because if your version of kindness has you swallowing every injustice, forgiving every betrayal, staying silent just to keep the peace, then that's not kindness. That's domination. That's you letting yourself be controlled while pretending it's virtue. And here's the liberating truth: you don't have to give up kindness to stop being weak. You don't have to harden your heart. You don't have to become cold or cruel. You just have to make a shift. Stop confusing self-erasure with goodness. Stop mistaking silence for peace. Stop thinking that suffering quietly makes you noble. Real nobility comes from choosing compassion without abandoning yourself. From saying yes when it's right and no when it's not. From showing love without being manipulated. From giving generously but never from a place of fear. So here's the shift I want you to take with you. Weakness says, "I'll do anything to be accepted." Kindness says, "I'll act with integrity, but I won't betray myself in the process." Weakness forgives because it's afraid of losing approval. Kindness forgives because it chooses peace from a position of strength. Weakness says yes when it means no. Kindness says no with clarity, without shame, without apology. That's the difference, and it's the difference between being used and being respected. Machiavelli, despite all the bad press, understood this distinction. He wasn't against virtue, he was against naivety. He knew that in a world full of wolves, a sheep who calls itself good is just a sheep waiting to be eaten. That's why his advice was so harsh: don't aim to be loved if it costs you respect. Don't hide behind the illusion of goodness if it makes you powerless. He understood that respect is built on consequence, not compliance. And that's the lesson you need to take into your own life. You can be kind, but you must be strong. You can be compassionate, but you must be firm. You can be generous, but you must never give from fear. That's real kindness. That's the kind of kindness that commands presence, that earns respect, that protects your dignity while still reflecting your humanity. In the next part, we'll talk about what happens when people wake up to this truth, and how many of them fall into the trap of swinging too far the other way, turning cold, indifferent, even cruel as a reaction. Because the real path forward isn't to abandon your heart, but to learn how to live authentically, balancing compassion with strength. But before we go there, let me leave you with this: kindness without strength will destroy you. Kindness with strength will set you free. When people finally wake up and realize that their so-called kindness has been nothing more than a mask for fear, they often swing to the opposite extreme. It's what I call the rebound effect. After years of being walked on, ignored, and used, you decide you're done. You're not going to be the nice guy anymore. You're not going to be the one who sacrifices, who bends, who gives. So what do? You harden. You shut down. You start telling yourself, if being nice got me hurt, then the only way forward is to stop caring altogether. And at first, that feels powerful. It feels like freedom. But it's not freedom. It's just another trap. You see, When you replace weakness with coldness, you haven't actually healed. You've just built another mask. This one looks stronger, but it's still a prison. Because the truth is, real power isn't about being cold, indifferent, or cruel. That's not strength, that's trauma pretending to be strength. That's pain wearing armor. And armor might protect you in the short term, but it also keeps you from connecting, from loving, from living fully. So what's the way out? How do you stop being a people pleaser without turning into someone unrecognizable to yourself? The answer is authenticity. Authenticity is the middle path. It's not about being good or bad, kind or cruel, soft or hard. It's about being real. It's about knowing who you are, standing in that truth, and refusing to betray yourself ever again. Let me make this practical, because authenticity sounds nice in theory, but it has to show up in action. The first step is learning that your voice matters. You've been conditioned to think that setting boundaries, expressing anger, or saying no is selfish. But that's a lie. It's not selfish to protect your dignity. It's not selfish to say, this doesn't work for me. In fact, selfishness is expecting someone to live silently while their needs go unmet. Selfishness is demanding endless patience and forgiveness from you while giving nothing in return. Speaking up isn't selfish, it's dignity in action. The second step is practicing the word no. And I mean really practicing it, because for most of you it feels unnatural, almost impossible. But no is one of the most liberating words in the English language. And here's the key, it doesn't have to be shouted, it doesn't have to come with anger. A calm, steady, non-negotiable no has more power than 1,000 nervous justifications. Because no communicates that you have boundaries. And people respect boundaries. The ones who don't respect them, they're the very people who are profiting off your silence. The third step is to pay attention to who reacts badly to your change. This one's important, because when you start asserting yourself, there will be people who accuse you of being selfish, or rude, or different. Don't fall for it. That's just their discomfort talking, because your submission was useful to them. Your silence benefited them. When you stop playing that role, they lose access to the version of you they could control. And yes, they'll resist. They'll push back. But that resistance is not a sign you're doing something wrong, it's a sign you're growing. The fourth step is to stop trying to be understood by everyone. One of the hardest truths to accept is that not everyone will like the new you. Not everyone will understand why you've changed. And that's okay. You don't owe loyalty to the image they created of you. Your loyalty is to yourself, your peace, your truth, your emotional health. The moment you stop trying to win universal approval is the moment you start to taste real freedom. And finally, the fifth step is replacing your obsession with acceptance with a commitment to authenticity. Because when you act authentically, you won't win everyone's approval, but you'll earn something better, respect. Respect from others, yes, but more importantly, respect from yourself. And that's the kind of respect that no one can take away. Now, let me challenge you with this. Think about the last time you said yes when you wanted to say no. How did you feel afterwards? Did you feel free, or did you feel resentful? Did you feel generous, or did you feel invisible? Now think about a time when you finally said no, even if it was hard, even if it upset someone. How did that feel? Probably scary, maybe uncomfortable, but also liberating. That's the taste of authenticity. That's the power you've been missing. Here's the truth, the world doesn't need you to be cold. It doesn't need you to be cruel. It doesn't need you to build walls so high that no one can ever reach you. What the world needs, and what you need, is for you to be whole. For you to bring the fullness of who you are into every room you walk into. For you to be kind when you want to be, but firm when you need to be. For you to forgive when it's genuine, but never out of fear. For you to love without erasing yourself. And when you start living this way, something amazing happens. You begin to attract the right people, the ones who value your strength as much as your kindness, who respect your boundaries, who see you for who you really are instead of the mask you used to wear. And at the same time, you start losing the ones who only wanted you for your submission. That's not a loss. That's a blessing. Because every person who falls away clears space for the ones who belong. So here's the choice in front of you. You can keep bouncing between extremes, either the nice guy who's always used, or the hardened shell who feels safe but empty, or you can choose the third path. The path of authenticity. The path where you don't live for approval, but you also don't live in denial. The path where you stop begging for permission to exist and start standing in your truth unapologetically. That's what real freedom looks like. And in the final part, we're going to bring it all together. Because now comes the decisive moment, the moment where you have to choose. Do you want to keep living as the prisoner of your niceness, or do you want to step into the power of authenticity? Do you want to be loved for a mask, or respected for who you really are? That's the choice. And it's one only you can make. We've come to the point where you can no longer pretend you don't see the truth. You've heard it, you've felt it, and deep down, you already know it. For too long, you've been living as the nice guy, the agreeable one, the peacemaker, the one who bends, sacrifices, and swallows everything just to keep others happy. And maybe that role earned you some compliments. Maybe people told you, you're such a good person, or you're always so understanding. But ask yourself honestly, did those words ever turn into real respect? Did they ever give you the dignity, the voice, the presence you deserve? Or did they just keep you locked in a cage decorated with polite applause? Here's the raw truth, no one is coming to set you free. There will never be a day when someone shows up at your door, thanks you for all your sacrifices, hands you the respect you've been begging for, and says, now you can finally rest. That moment isn't coming. Because as long as you're willing to be used, there will always be someone willing to use you. As long as you're willing to give your time, your energy, your loyalty without boundaries, there will always be people ready to take it without hesitation. This isn't cynicism. It's reality. And reality doesn't bend to good intentions. So you're faced with a choice. You can keep living as the good, harmless, endlessly patient version of yourself that society has applauded. You can keep saying yes when you mean no. You can keep sacrificing while waiting for recognition that will never come. But if you do, don't be surprised when you find yourself living a life of resentment, frustration, and invisibility. Or, you can wake up. You can decide that your kindness will no longer be a collar around your neck. You can choose to act with presence, with power, with intention. You can decide that you will no longer beg for scraps of respect, because you know you deserve more than that. And that's the line you have to cross. Do you want to be loved, or do you want to be free? Because here's the uncomfortable truth, if you live only to be loved, you will never be free. Love that is earned through submission isn't love, it's dependence. It's fragile. It vanishes the moment you stop playing the role. But freedom comes when you choose authenticity over approval, when you stop asking for permission to exist, when you stand firm in who you are even if it displeases some. Ask yourself this, when was the last time you said no without feeling guilty? When was the last time you put yourself first without apologizing for it? When was the last time you acted from truth instead of fear? If you can't remember, then it's time to admit that your obsession with being loved has cost you everything, your dignity, your peace, your authenticity. And now you get to decide whether you're going to keep paying that price. Freedom doesn't mean you stop being kind. Freedom doesn't mean you stop caring. Freedom doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you choose when, how, and to whom you give those things. It means you don't give them away from fear, but from strength. It means you understand that your worth isn't determined by how many people approve of you, but by how true you are to yourself. So here's my challenge to you. The next time someone asks you for something you don't want to give, say no, calmly, firmly, unapologetically. The next time you feel disrespected, call it out instead of swallowing it. The next time you're tempted to play small just to keep the peace, remind yourself that peace bought with your silence isn't peace at all. It's surrender. And you're done surrendering. Yes, some people will resist your change. Some will call you selfish. Some will try to guilt you back into submission. But that resistance is proof you're on the right path. Because the ones who truly belong in your life will respect the stronger you. They'll appreciate your clarity, your honesty, your authenticity. They won't just love you for what you give them, they'll respect you for who you are. And that's the kind of respect you've been missing all along. So you have to decide, are you going to keep living as the prisoner of your niceness, or are you going to step into freedom? Are you going to keep begging for love like a dog waiting for scraps, or are you going to walk with the dignity of someone who knows they don't need to beg to exist? The decision is yours, and it's a decision that will shape the rest of your life. I'll leave you with this: the world respects those who respect themselves. And until you learn to respect yourself, until you learn to say no without guilt, to set boundaries without apology, to live authentically without fear, you will always be at the mercy of others. But the day you stop asking for permission to exist, the day you stop living for approval, the day you decide to be free, that's the day everything changes. So what will it be? Loved for a mask, or free as yourself? The choice is in your hands. And if you're ready, if you're truly ready, then today is the day you take off the mask, step out of the prison, and begin to live as the person you were always meant to be. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this journey. I know your time is valuable. If this message spoke to you, if it gave you even one moment of clarity or peace, I'd be grateful if you'd let me know. A simple like, a comment with your thoughts, or subscribing to the channel helps this community grow, and it helps more people who might need these words to find them. Share your reflections below. I do read them. I'll see you in the next chapter. Until then, take care of your peace.